This is George Rudolph, and you're listening to the WUSB Stony Brook. And right now we've got a tune called Gaining Altitude on from the Chris Guthrie project. And I'm really happy to be able to have Chris on the phone today to tell you all about it. So here we go. Hello, Chris. How are you?
Hi, George. I'm doing great. Really glad to be on your show today.
Oh, listen, we're glad to have you. Let me just, you don't mind the music in the background? I just got it right there. Some people say, oh, it keeps it interesting. Anyway, I'm so glad to have you on. This gives us a chance to talk about your new CD, Chris Guthrie Project, which I really like. I've played like several tunes from it. Bombi's Bounce I really like, and Danger Cat is really excellent. And Joe... I don't know how to say that. Jodor for my dad.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Exactly.
And just to let the audience know, Chris's father's name was Kent Guthrie, and he was a really great jazz guitarist and a great big influence on his life, along with a musician who I know very well, Steve Oliver. So I'm going to give Chris a little chance to talk about his CD and the concept behind it and what he's doing with it. Go ahead, Chris. Go, man. Go for it.
Fantastic. Yeah. Well, this has been a real great experience for me doing the CD. It came out last July. As George mentioned, it's called Gaining Altitude. It has 10 great tunes that Steve Oliver and I wrote and played together. Steve produced the CD, and we just had a great time doing it. What's really kind of cool about this project, I have to say, is got to work with Steve Oliver, who's just one of my favorite musicians of all time. But I'm also really honored to be able to call Steve a friend. He and I grew up together in the same town in the San Francisco Bay Area of California. We're about the same age. We kind of grew up both really active and interested in playing music. We both had, our eyes set on, music careers and so forth. It was really interesting that he and I had a really sort of a background of practicing together and jamming together when we were younger. And then it just so happened that I was able to contact him when he was coming through Seattle, my hometown, in 2015. He was touring with Acoustic Alchemy. And he and I sat down after one of his shows and just started talking about, what we were doing, who we were listening to, what we were working on at the time. And he said, hey, we should do the project together. And he didn't have to ask twice. So that's how the whole thing got started. But you had asked about some of my influences and mentioned my dad, who's a big influence to me. He's a guitarist and pianist, and I grew up listening to a lot of the music that he was interested in at the time. I remember him playing, for example, a lot of Thelonious Monk on the piano as I was growing up, among other things. He got me interested in jazz. He bought me my first real book when I was 16. It was kind of a rite of passage, I guess you could say, so to speak. So I have just so many great memories playing with my dad, who's still alive today, by the way, and gigging in his hometown. But have so many great memories of just growing up, playing jazz, and then had the pleasure and real great fortune of working with some really outstanding teachers over the years. back in the late 80s, early 90s, I had the good fortune of being able to take theory lessons and guitar lessons from a fellow named Mark Bonilla, who was involved with the Keith Emerson band, as well as a band called Toy Matinee, and has done a lot of work in film and TV. But he gave me my start, made some mixtapes for me, really got me listening to the right stuff, heading in the right direction. I later started taking courses at our local university at the time, and I was really fortunate. At that time, Chuck Israels was the jazz program director. And I don't know if many of your listeners are familiar with Chuck, but he was with Bill Evans for the Bill Evans Trio from 1961 to 1966. Just a fabulous lineup of musicians there, and working with Chuck was just a great experience. He gave me such insights into, and as well as the other students, into what it was like working as a jazz musician during the 60s, and certainly working with someone of the caliber of Bill Evans. It was just really a great learning experience for me. I went on to kind of study with some other notable musicians in the Bay Area. But what was really interesting and kind of tells a story here is of why this Gaining Altitude is my first album is in the 90s I discovered computers and I got a little sidetracked. I ended up really putting a lot of my passion and energy into learning about computers, and I developed a career around that. So now I guess you could say I'm circling back on something that was a real passion in my life some years ago, and I'm really happy that I kind of stayed with it and kept it going through all those years. And I'm really lucky to have met up again with Steve Oliver, who suggested that we do this project together. So it's really worked out great, and I'm really happy to be able to share this music with everyone.
Well, we're happy to have you share it with us. And just a mention on Steve Oliver, I have one of his CDs that's called Pictures and Frames, which is actually pretty good. And I also have him. I mean, he plays with lots of other bands and stuff. So it's he really plays around. He's really excellent. It must have been an experience to work with him. I mean, he's so talented.
Oh yes, he's just in my mind a musical genius. So in this album in particular, Steve plays the drums, bass, as well as guitar. So many people don't know that how talented he is, but he is a multi-instrumentalist and an excellent vocalist. Plays many instruments well, and he's just a pleasure to work with. We wrote these 10 songs on the album in over 4 or 5 sessions that happened over about 2-year time span. There was no theme in particular to the album other than Steve and I just sitting down and writing songs that we liked, stuff that we were in, stuff that sort of emulated some of the things that we were both influenced by or reflected our musical tastes. We have very similar musical tastes, so it was very easy to work with Steve, and it was just a pleasure to do that, and to get to sort of rekindle a friendship that started many years prior. So it was really a wonderful experience on many levels.
Well, in addition to playing piano, you also play guitar, right?
I do.
Yeah. I just wanted to say a couple of things, which is you played guitar in a jazz big band at Cal State, right? And
sure did, yeah.
And you played guitar in a jazz blues trio called T Lane and the Nighthawks. And then you played keyboards in an alternative rock band called Fred Roth Review. And this gives me an opportunity to say, one of the things I always say about smooth jazz is smooth jazz rocks. And so many of the guys that play what falls in that category love rock and roll and have a lot of influences. And I see you call your band a cross between Pat Metheny and Steely Dan, two of my favorites. So I just thought it was really great. And I just really have a real great love for this music that people make here in the smooth jazz category. And you're one of those guys. That's all I could say.
Right on. Yeah. And George, you're absolutely right. I can't help but bring in all the music that I love to listen to into it. And it's not just, jazz. My interests are very, widespread, maybe even eclectic. But, some aspects of classical, I think, found their way into the album. Certainly the rock influences. And then the good old traditional jazz influence as well. It all plays a part, and each of those, I think each genre has its own uniqueness and flavor. And like you, I love it. I love to hear new music that brings in different flavors from different areas. Mixes them together in new and interesting ways. So that's what I always hope to strive for.
Well, that is smooth jazz in a nutshell. I always say smooth jazz is like rock and Latin and jazz and R&B and funk all meeting together in some little intersection, a little five-cornered intersection where they all meet and collaborate. But listen, tell people where they can, how they can follow you. You have a website?
I do, yeah. So that's probably the best place to start. So it's at www.chrisguthriemusic.com. And if you go there, you'll see what's essentially EPK for Gaining Altitude. A little bit of the background story, song list, and some more information, dedications and so forth. But I also have links out to my various other social media sites. I have a Facebook page, a Twitter site, Instagram, and then links out to Apple Music and Spotify and some of the other music sites. So that's really a great place to start, and you can get to everywhere else from there. And I want to put in a little plug for my friend Robert McLean at Sundial Media, who just did a wonderful job putting that site together, and has really been a huge help with me, helping me with all the social media aspects of what I do.
Well, social media is really a big part of what goes on today, that's for sure, because I have you on Instagram, so
wonderful.
I post once in a while. I usually post when my shows are on so that people can know that I'm on the air, because you can listen to WUSB at WUSB.FM. You can stream it live, and let me see, I'm trying to think of something else I could ask you, but I think we've covered like most of these topics, but I just want to say, let's see. Who are Julian, Aiden, and Elisa?
Yeah, my children, my kids, they have been such an inspiration to me, and I have to say they are my number one fans too. So whenever I write a new song, they hear it first, and they give me feedback.
well, I guess.
So, yeah.
Well, I guess that makes me like a number 5 fan or something like that. But
Yeah.
well, listen, it's really been a great pleasure to talk with you. I'm so happy. I just